Eduardo Enrique Salvatore's hand trembled as he held the envelope. Inside the white marble mansion, surrounded by furniture that cost more than entire houses, he opened the letterhead from the law firm. 3 words shattered the silence of that cold December morning: custody action. The 52-year-old billionaire felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. It was not about him. It was about Theo, the 3-year-old boy who in recent months had turned that empty house into something different. The son of Dandara, the cleaning woman who had worked there for 2 years. Eduardo reread the document. Someone was requesting custody of the boy. Someone who had never appeared before. The name on the paper was unknown, but the threat was real. His mind flew back to 3 weeks earlier, when everything began. He was alone in the municipal park, sitting on the same bench where he used to go with Helena before she passed away. 2 years had gone by since the accident. 2 years in which Christmas ceased to exist for him. The city's decorative lights were just meaningless flashes. The Christmas songs, irritating noises. That bench was his refuge of pain. That was when a little boy with dark skin and curious eyes appeared in front of him. Messy curly hair, a worn red coat, sneakers with untied laces. Theo held a small yellow plastic truck and stared fixedly at Eduardo. "Why are you crying, sir?" The thin voice cut through the cold air. Eduardo had not noticed the tears on his own face. He wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. Children should not see men crying. "I'm not crying." "You are. My mom cries the same way when she thinks I'm not looking." The boy sat down beside him without asking permission. He placed the little truck on Eduardo's lap. "You can play if you want. Playing helps when we're sad." Eduardo was paralyzed. There was something in the simplicity of that gesture that pierced all his defenses. The toy was old, the paint chipped, but it was being offered with pure generosity. "Theo. Theo, where are you?" A black woman of about 30 appeared running between the trees. Hair tied in a bun, work uniform under a thin coat. When she saw her son next to Eduardo, her face mixed relief and concern. "I'm sorry, sir. He slipped away while I was." "Theo, I already told you not to leave my side." Eduardo recognized the voice before seeing the face. Dandara. The woman who cleaned his mansion 3 times a week. The woman he barely greeted, who received orders from the housekeeper Estella and disappeared through the corridors in silence. "No problem. He just talked to me." Dandara took her son by the hand, embarrassed. But Theo resisted, pointing at Eduardo. "Mom, the man is alone. He needs friends." Eduardo felt something strange in his chest. A small crack in the wall of ice he had built around his heart. In the days that followed, Theo began to appear at the mansion when Dandara came to work. The housekeeper Estella complained, said that a child interfered with the service, that it was unacceptable. But Eduardo, for the first time in 2 years, went against the rigid rules of the house. Let the boy stay. Theo explored the gardens, played in the living room, asked questions non-stop. And Eduardo, without quite understanding how, began to answer. He began to come down from the office. He began to smile again, even if it was only with the corner of his mouth. Helena would have liked that boy. She had always wanted to have children, but fate never allowed it. Eduardo remembered her saying that children saw the world in a way adults forgot. Theo proved that every day. Now, holding that legal document, Eduardo understood the seriousness of the situation. Someone wanted to take Theo away from Dandara. And he could not allow that. Not after everything. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer. He needed answers. He needed to understand who was behind it. But first, he needed to find Dandara and let her know she was not alone. While he waited for the call to connect, Eduardo looked out the window. The Christmas decorations he had ordered removed were still stored in the depot. For the first time, he thought about putting them back. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Leave a comment telling us what you think and which city or country you are watching from. Eduardo Salvatore did not know it, but that Christmas would be completely different from all the others. And little Theo was just beginning to change his life. Dandara held the coffee cup with both hands, trying to warm her frozen fingers. She was sitting in the mansion's kitchen, a place where she normally was not allowed to rest. But Eduardo had insisted. He needed to talk to her about the document. Do you know someone named Vinicius Tavares? Dandara's face lost all its color. The cup almost slipped from her hands. Eduardo saw the fear in her eyes and confirmed his suspicions. She knew that name. He is Theo's father. The words came out softly, almost a whisper. Eduardo sat down in the chair beside her, something Estella would never approve of. An employer did not sit next to a maid. But he no longer cared about those idiotic rules. Tell me everything. Dandara took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking. She began to speak, and Eduardo listened to every word with growing attention. Vinicius and Dandara had met 7 years earlier. He was a salesman in an electronics store. She worked as a waitress in a restaurant. Vinicius was charming, funny, made promises about the future. Dandara fell in love too quickly. When she discovered the pregnancy, everything changed. Vinicius disappeared. He blocked her phone number, moved to another city, deleted all his social media. Dandara was left completely alone. No close family, no support, no money. She worked while pregnant until the 8th month. Theo was born in a public hospital, and she went back to work 15 days later because she had no choice. I never asked him for anything. I never went to court. I just wanted to forget that he ever existed. Eduardo felt anger. A cold, calculated anger. He knew men like that. Cowards who ran from responsibility and then came back when it suited them. Why did he come back now? Dandara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Her voice was choked. He found out where I work. Found out it's here, in your house. He showed up last week when I was leaving. Said he saw photos of me on social media, photos of Theo playing in the garden. He thought I had become rich. Eduardo closed his eyes. He was beginning to understand the whole picture. Did he ask for money? 5,000. He said that if I didn't give it to him, he would go to court to ask for custody of Theo. He said I work too much, that I leave my son alone, that I don't have the means to raise a child. He said that any judge would give custody to the father. Dandara's voice broke completely. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry. Eduardo felt a pain in his chest. That woman worked until her hands bled to give her son dignity. And now a parasite wanted to destroy everything. Did you give him the money? I don't have 5,000. I can barely pay rent and food. I told him that, and he laughed. Laughed in my face. Said that then he would do it the hard way. Eduardo stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Theo was playing in the garden under the attentive eyes of the gardener. The boy ran after butterflies, completely unaware of the danger surrounding his life. Dandara, look at me. She raised her tear-soaked face. You are not going to lose your son. I promise. You don't understand. People like me always lose. The system was not made to protect people like me. He's going to succeed. He's going to take my boy. Eduardo sat down beside her again. For the first time in years, he touched another person's hand with the intention of comforting. I understand more than you imagine. And I have resources. I have the best lawyers in the country on my phone. Vinicius Tavares doesn't know who he's dealing with. Dandara shook her head, incredulous. Why? Why would you do this for me? I'm just your cleaning lady. Eduardo looked at Theo through the window. The boy had just found a flower and was running to show it to the gardener. His little face lit up with joy. You are not just my cleaning lady. And Theo is not just your son. He made me remember that goodness still exists in this world. No one is going to take that from me. No one. At that moment, the kitchen door opened abruptly. Estella, the housekeeper, entered with her perpetual expression of disapproval. She looked at Eduardo and Dandara sitting side by side and frowned. Mr. Salvatore, there is a man at the door. He says he needs to speak about an urgent matter involving an employee of the house. Eduardo and Dandara exchanged looks. They knew who it was. Vinicius Tavares had arrived. Eduardo walked to the front door with firm steps. Dandara tried to follow him, but he made a gesture for her to stay in the kitchen. She needed protection, not more humiliation. At the entrance of the mansion, a man of about 35 waited. Wrinkled dress shirt, faded jeans, dirty sneakers. Vinicius wore a confident smile on his face, the kind of smile of someone who thought he had already won. Good afternoon. I came to pick up my ex and talk about my son. Eduardo stopped 2 meters away. He analyzed every detail of that man. Too relaxed posture, calculating look, hands in his pockets. A predator who thought he was clever. You don't have a son here. Vinicius's smile faltered for a second, but soon returned. I think there's a misunderstanding. Theo is my biological son. I have the right to see him. Right. Eduardo took a step forward. You abandoned a pregnant woman. Disappeared for 3 years. Didn't pay a single cent in child support. Didn't ask whether the child was alive or dead. And now you come talking about rights. Vinicius lost some of his arrogance. He hadn't expected resistance. Usually, when he showed up with legal threats, people bowed in fear. I had my reasons. But now I'm ready to take responsibility. Liar. Eduardo's voice was pure ice. You saw photos of Dandara working here and thought you could make easy money. Blackmail is not responsibility. Vinicius's face turned red. He looked around, checking if anyone else was listening. I don't know what you're talking about. I just want what's best for my boy. 5,000. That's how much you asked to leave her alone. Vinicius swallowed hard. How did that old man know? Dandara had told everything. He needed to change strategy quickly. Look, I don't want trouble. I just want to see my son. If Dandara can't raise him properly, I can help. I have rights as a father. Eduardo crossed his arms. Every second of that conversation increased his contempt for that man. You filed for custody. You hired a cheap lawyer who uses intimidation tactics. But you made a fatal mistake. What mistake? You messed with the wrong person. Vinicius laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. You're just her boss. That doesn't give you any power over family matters. Eduardo took his phone out of his pocket and showed the screen to Vinicius. It was a photo. An old photo, from 7 years earlier, showing Vinicius entering a motel with another woman. The date was clear, 3 days after Dandara told him about the pregnancy. The blood drained from Vinicius's face. Where did you get that? I have private investigators. The best. In 48 hours they uncovered your entire life. 3 lawsuits for bounced checks. 2 for fraud. An outstanding arrest warrant in another state for abandonment of a dependent. Oh, and you have another daughter, 5 years old, who has also never seen a dime of your money. Vinicius took a step back. His legs were shaking. That proves nothing. I can change. I have the right to start over. Eduardo put the phone away. His voice was calm, but it carried a deadly threat. Here's what's going to happen. You will immediately withdraw the custody request. You will sign a document renouncing any rights over Theo. And you will disappear forever from that woman's and that child's life. And if I refuse? Then I will use all my resources to destroy you. I will reopen every archived case. I will find every person you scammed. I will make sure that arrest warrant is carried out. And when you are in jail, I will personally speak to the judge responsible for the custody case and hand over a complete dossier on who you really are. Vinicius tried to keep his composure, but he was losing. You can't do this. It's abuse of power. You can bet I can. And I will do it with pleasure. Men like you are the scum of society. Parasites who suck the life out of honest people and then disappear when things get hard. I just wanted some money. She works in the house of a billionaire. I thought he had given her money. The mask finally fell. Vinicius confessed his real intention, and Eduardo recorded every word on the phone he discreetly held again. Thank you for the confession. This will be very useful in court. Vinicius realized the mistake too late. He looked at Eduardo's phone and understood he had been recorded. You. Be careful with your next words. Estella, call security. The housekeeper, who had been watching everything from a distance, signaled to 2 burly guards who immediately approached. Vinicius raised his hands. All right. I'm leaving. But this isn't over. It is over. And it ends now. Tomorrow morning my lawyer will send you the papers. You have 24 hours to sign. If you don't, The dossier goes to the police. The guards escorted Vinicius to the gate. He left shouting empty threats that no one took seriously. When the gate closed, Eduardo finally took a deep breath. Dandara appeared in the doorway, holding Theo tightly against her chest. The boy was frightened by the shouting. She looked at Eduardo with tears in her eyes. "You did all this for us?" Eduardo approached and knelt to Theo's height. The boy was still holding his little yellow truck. "No one is going to take you away from your mother, little one. You can relax." Theo held out the toy to Eduardo, just as he had done in the park. "Now you can play too. You are our friend." Eduardo took the little truck and for the first time in 2 years, felt like crying. But this time it wasn't from sadness. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Vinicius. Eduardo had expected him to sign the renunciation documents, but the deadline passed without a response. The silence was worse than a direct threat. On the morning of the 4th day, Eduardo received a call from his lawyer, Dr. Augusto Ferreira. "Eduardo, we have a problem." Vinicius not only refused to sign but also obtained a temporary visitation injunction. The judge has determined that he can see Theo later this week. Eduardo felt his blood boil. How is that possible? He abandoned the boy. His lawyer submitted a fraudulent psychological report claiming that Vinicius suffered from depression at the time and has now recovered. And there's more, he got a witness. What witness? There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. "Estela. Your housekeeper." Eduardo almost dropped the phone. Estela. The woman who had worked in the house for 15 years. The woman Helena had trusted. How could she do this? What did she say? That Dandara leaves Theo alone, that the child runs around the mansion unsupervised, that she is negligent. The judge took it seriously because Estela has no direct ties to either party. Eduardo hung up the phone and went straight to find Estela. He found her in the pantry, organizing cleaning products as if nothing had happened. "You testified against Dandara." Estela turned slowly, showing neither surprise nor guilt. "I testified the truth. That woman brings the child to work, which is against the rules. The boy disrupts the household routine. I only said what I saw." "You lied. Theo was never alone. I allowed him to come. I wanted him to stay here." Estela crossed her arms, her expression hard and inflexible. "You haven't been well since Mrs. Helena passed away. Your decisions are compromised. That woman is taking advantage of your vulnerability. Someone had to bring common sense to this situation." Eduardo felt a rage he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal. "How much did he pay you?" Estela blinked, unsettled for the first time. "Excuse me?" "Vinicius. How much did he pay you to lie in court?" "No one paid me anything. I did what was right." Eduardo took a step forward. His voice was low, dangerously controlled. "You are fired. I want you out of this house in an hour." Estela paled. She had worked there for 15 years. That house was her life. "You can't do this. I have labor rights. I will sue." "Sue. My lawyers love lawsuits. But you're leaving now." Estela opened her mouth to protest, but saw something on Eduardo's face that made her back down. She grabbed her bag and left without saying another word. Eduardo returned to his office. He needed a plan. The visitation injunction would be executed in 2 days. He couldn't let Theo be handed over to Vinicius, even for a few hours. That's when his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered. "Eduardo Salvatore? Who is this?" "My name is Julia Mendez. I am the mother of Vinicius Tavares's other daughter. I heard he's trying to gain custody of a child." Eduardo went on high alert. "How did you get my number?" "Your investigators contacted me a few days ago. I didn't want to get involved, but my daughter convinced me. She's 5 years old and asks about her father every day. I had to explain that he never wanted to meet her. I can't let him do this to another child." "Would you testify against him?" "More than that. I have proof. Messages where he threatened me when he found out I was pregnant. Audio recordings where he admits he will never pay child support. And I have documents proving he sold a car in my name to pay gambling debts. Eduardo sat down. This was exactly what he needed. Julia, can you be in court tomorrow morning? I can. But there's one condition. What is it? I want him to pay everything he owes my daughter. 5 years of back child support. If you help me get that, I'll help you protect this child. Eduardo smiled for the first time that day. You have my word. The next day, the courtroom was full. Vinicius arrived with his cheap lawyer, confident the injunction would be upheld. Dandara was pale, holding Eduardo's hands as if they were her only anchor in reality. The judge, a 60-year-old man with a stern expression, banged the gavel. Let's begin. The defense may present their witnesses. Dr. Augusto stood. Your Honor, I would like to call Ms. Julia Mendez to the witness stand. Vinicius turned sharply. When he saw Julia entering the courtroom, his face went white. He tried to stand, but his lawyer pulled him back into the chair. Julia took the oath and sat down. She looked directly at Vinicius as she spoke. This man impregnated me 6 years ago. When I told him, he told me to abort or disappear. I chose to have my daughter. He never gave a cent. Never asked her name. Never wanted to know if she was alive. The judge frowned and looked at Vinicius. Mr. Tavares, is this true? Vinicius tried to speak, but nothing came out. Julia continued. I have messages and audios that prove everything. He doesn't want to be a father. He wants money. And he's using an innocent child as a bargaining chip. Dr. Augusto handed the documents to the judge. He read each page in silence. The more he read, the harder his expression became. Mr. Tavares, stand. Vinicius obeyed, trembling. This court denies the visitation injunction. Furthermore, I order you to immediately pay 5 years of overdue child support for your first daughter. And I definitively deny any custody request regarding the minor Theo. You are prohibited from approaching the child or her mother. Failure to comply will result in imprisonment. Vinicius tried to protest, but the judge banged the gavel firmly. It's over. Dandara collapsed in tears. Eduardo held her, and for the first time in 2 years, allowed his own tears to fall as well. Christmas night arrived with a different kind of silence. It was no longer the heavy silence of grief that Eduardo had carried for so long. It was a silence of peace, of new beginnings, of something blooming where there had once been only pain. Eduardo looked out the office window. Outside, snow was beginning to fall gently over the illuminated garden. For the first time in 2 years, he had allowed the Christmas decorations to be put up. Golden lights wrapped the trees, wreaths adorned the doors, and a star shone at the top of the giant pine tree at the entrance. Helena would have loved to see this. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Dandara. Dinner is almost ready. Theo is eagerly waiting for you. Don't be late. Eduardo smiled. 3 weeks ago, he could never have imagined spending Christmas in the modest home of an employee. But that employee had become so much more. Dandara was now his friend. And Theo was the reason he had started to believe it was worth getting up every day. He put on a thick coat and went down the stairs. The mansion was empty. He had fired Estella and given the other staff time off to spend Christmas with their families. For the first time, he didn't feel alone in that vast expanse of marble and silence. Eduardo picked up the bags he had prepared, toys for Theo, new clothes for Dandara, and a basket of food she could never afford on her salary. He knew she would probably complain, say it was too much, but he didn't care. He wanted to do it. The car drove across the city until it reached the neighborhood where Dandara lived. Small houses, narrow streets, children playing on the sidewalks despite the cold. It was a world completely different from the mansion, but there was something there that wealth could never buy: community, life, human warmth. Eduardo parked in front of a light blue house with a small porch. Before he could get out, the door opened and Theo ran out, still in pajamas, with a little yellow truck in his hand. Uncle Eduardo. Uncle Eduardo is here. The title made Eduardo's heart tighten. Uncle. He would never be a father, but being Theo's uncle was more than enough. Hi, champ. I brought you something. Present. Theo's eyes sparkled like Christmas lights. Dandara appeared at the door, drying her hands on her apron. She looked different. Lighter, happier. The weight of 3 years of fear and insecurity had finally lifted from her shoulders. Come in before the cold takes over the house. Eduardo entered and was greeted by the wonderful smell of homemade food. The house was small, simple, but every corner was decorated with love. Paper ornaments, Theo's drawings pasted on the walls, a small artificial Christmas tree with colorful baubles. The table was set with an embroidered tablecloth, mismatched plates, simple glass cups. But there was something there that the mansion's dining table never had, the promise of a meal shared with genuine affection. You didn't have to bring all this. Dandara looked at the bags with tearful eyes. I know. But I wanted to. Theo was already opening presents on the living room floor. When he saw the set of new toy cars, he screamed with joy and ran to hug Eduardo with all the strength his little arms could muster. Thank you, Uncle. You're the best. Eduardo hugged the boy back and felt something heal inside him. A wound he thought would never close. They had dinner together. Dandara had made rice, beans, farofa, a simple roast meat, and a salad. It wasn't the feast Eduardo was used to, but it was the best food he had tasted in years. Because it tasted like belonging. During dinner, Theo told stories non-stop. He talked about the toys, school, a new friend he had made. Eduardo listened to every word attentively, laughing at the right moments, asking questions, participating. Dandara watched everything with a discreet smile. She saw when Eduardo wiped away a quiet tear from the corner of his eye. She understood. This man had spent 2 Christmases completely alone, submerged in a pain that seemed endless. After dinner, Theo picked up the little yellow truck, the original one he had offered to Eduardo the day they met. Uncle, now you can really keep it. Because you're not alone anymore. Eduardo took the toy with trembling hands. It was just an old faded piece of plastic, but it represented so much more. It represented the second chance he didn't know he needed. Thank you, Theo. I'll keep it forever. Later, when Theo fell asleep on the sofa hugging the new cars, Dandara and Eduardo stayed on the porch, watching the snow fall. You saved us, Dandara said softly. No. You saved me. Dandara looked at him, confused. When Helena died, I died too. I spent 2 years just breathing, not truly living. Theo reminded me that there are still good things in the world. That it's still worth trying. She would be proud of you. Eduardo smiled, looking at the starry sky. I hope so. They remained silent for a few minutes, just enjoying the peaceful night. Eduardo realized that for the first time in a long time, Christmas had meaning again. Not because of the lights, the gifts, or the food, but because of the human connection he had forgotten was possible. Merry Christmas, Dandara. Merry Christmas, Eduardo. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts and where you're watching from. Stories like this need to be shared. Inside the house, Theo mumbled something in his sleep and hugged the truck even tighter. Eduardo looked out the window and smiled. That boy, with his innocence and kindness, had taught a billionaire the most important lesson: wealth is not measured in money, but in the people you choose.